I wanted to ask you, could you see what are some of the notable differences you could see between your peers' children who are brought up in Singapore versus like your own Raphael and Olivia? And I ask this also for my personal curiosity. I've got two young boys, 5 and 2, and relocation was in my mind, and a big reason for that is also about education for them. And now that your children are older than mine, you're maybe like a few steps ahead of me. And I'm just curious, right, to know your observations. And observations are observations. There's no right or wrong about observations. Yeah, I'm just curious to get your thoughts on this.
I mean, I think it's important to mention that Singapore is one of the best education standard in the world, like international renowned. And even amongst friends that I have in New Zealand, sometimes they will use Singapore math as a benchmark for their kids. Yeah, there's so much to be admired in terms of education for Singapore, but you and I being through the system, you ask me what's the difference. I think the main thing would be tuition would be the difference. I know of friends whose kids start tuition or supplementary class as young as in their kindergarten. In fact, I'll share the story. I'll not mention name. I have a friend, mom friend in Singapore. When her child started primary school, he didn't know how to read. And then the teacher went to her and said, can you please give him the usual supplementary class that other kids have to get him up to speed? And she needed to do that, but she told me all her friends when the kids were in their kindergarten, they started putting them in all these supplementary classes so the kids will be able to read, write, do their math. So by the time they go to primary school, they will have reached a certain level of standard. So she said to the teacher, I'm not going to do that, because if I were to give them supplementary class so that they can get up to speed, then what's the point of them going to school? What are you teaching? So yeah, I think just the pressure, because in a tight living space, like in the city, you get to see what other people are doing, and then you'd be like, oh, am I doing enough? Oh, maybe I should do this, because I know the other person is doing that, and everyone just jump on this bandwagon, and there's a bit more societal pressure in terms of supplementary classes, tuition, enrichment classes for your child.
No, I 100% relate. Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts I have about this topic. Now that my older boy, Julian, it's within quite near, right, to primary school. And I just want to highlight this fact, and this is not an opinion. This fact is that in Singapore, as much as, I think you're referring to the PISA, right, PISA rankings, which measures children's or student exam results or literacy in math and science, Singapore is always ranked one of the top 2 in the world. So like you said about the Auckland, Singapore math standard, it's always the go-to standard or the gold standard. I don't know if you know this, but maybe let's try this. So the equivalent of Singapore's primary school, which we go to in Singapore from 7 years old, can I ask for Auckland, what is the class size? The teacher to student ratio for equivalent of primary 1 in Auckland.
So in Auckland, there are 2 formats of primary school. One is a traditional classroom format, and the other one would be an open classroom format. The traditional classroom format is where you have one teacher facing probably 30, you ask me the size, probably 30, maybe some 35 students. So the format of the classroom will be arranged such that all the tables and chairs will face the teacher, and the teacher sits behind the desk. So there's a traditional classroom as we know it. And then there is the open classroom format, where all the kids and the teachers work in a round table working space, where teachers do not have a desk and they do not sit behind the desk, but rather they sit in the same round table as the child and working in a more facilitative manner. So in the open classroom format, will be 1:20 or 25 children.
The world has changed so much. If we keep doing the same thing in an environment that's changed, how can we assume that whatever has been working will continue to work in a changed environment?
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
With the fact that we're able to record this conversation where you're like 4 hours time zone different from me, I'm in Singapore and Auckland, technology has made all things possible. And in this world where there's rapid evolving technology, so my point is that, can we still assume that what has worked before is going to continue to work? When you and I gone through the system in Singapore where we will have to memorize stuff, right? Like in Chinese classes, 10-year series.
Yes.
So essentially, we are just being trained to be exam smart, exam prepared.
Yep, can't be more. Yeah,
we are not well educated in Singapore. We are well trained to prepare for exams. And do you think there's real proper exams in the real world? Do you think they are right?
So
Proper 10 year
I
series of
think
questions?
this goes back to the strategy of Singapore that was first thought of by Lee Kuan Yew. He wanted all of like manpower is the only resource, right? So we have to be well trained. And to be well trained, then yeah, you can be competitive. You can, then work for the bigger MNC.
Rationale in the 70s when there's a young nation where he wanted to really emphasize on math and science or the STEM, STEM. I can understand that. I can see the benefits. And I'm not saying anything bad about the system. I and yourself are beneficiaries of the system. I see it quite clearly when I did my exchange in Budapest in Eastern Europe. When I spoke my English, the Europeans there thought, oh, are you from America? How come you speak English like that? And Singapore, isn't it part of China? And I see some different impressions of people looking at Singapore. They may not know about Singapore, but they're surprised at the level of like maybe English proficiency. So I think it's a great thing. Don't get me wrong, it's a great thing. What worked in the past, can it continue to work in the future? I don't know. I like to shout no, and that's also one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast. I think change is inevitable.
Yes.
If you want to stay to where you are, what you've been doing, you can, but the world and environment has changed. And do you think you're still going to be effective if you don't change with the times? So change is inevitable, even if you want to preserve doing what you do, but change happens to you. Then what are you going to do then?
Wow.